welcome tomorrow. Whatever else I should say. This is a donated request from YouBuyWeRush. This is Imam Ibn... something must be wrong with my microphone. I pronounced it perfectly. So, before we get started, there is a thanks button on the channel. You can donate. You don't have to, but all donations are appreciated. You can request videos if you do donate. You can request videos if you don't. They just take a little bit longer to get to. My back's itching. Okay, I feel better. Subscribe to the channel. Forgot where I was at. Subscribe to the channel. Okay, good cough. Back to what I was saying. Subscribe to the channel if you like coughs. Click the bell because it tells you gardening recipes and how to change tires and stuff. I think. I don't know. And then if you don't want to do any of that, click the thumbs up. That tells YouTube you appreciate it. And
hayya 'alal falah.
We'll be talking about a mujaddid who revived Islam again in the life of people, a revival of the Sunnah and a follower of the path of the Salaf. He is a worshipper, a zahid, a person who disregarded the dunya, and he is those scholars that work hard. Today we'll be talking about the great Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, and his name is Ahmed Ibn Halim Ibn Salam Ibn Taymiyyah.
So that's a name. He would say that and I'd just be like, hi, I'm Kris. Nice to meet you. I would look like a fool.
And his nickname is Taqiyuddin. Grew up in a family of knowledge. His father, Abdul Halim Ibn Salam, and his nickname was Shihabuddin. He is a great scholar from Fuqaha al-Hanabila who studied before his father, which is the grandfather of Imam Ibn Taymiyyah. And his name is Al-Majd, Abdul Salam Ibn Taymiyyah. And people always mix up between Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, the grandson, and Ibn Taymiyyah, the grandfather. They were both great scholars. And between them was the father, who was also a scholar. And the scholars say that the father was like a star, a shining star, caller, full of knowledge. But he was overshadowed by the light of the moon and the light of the sun, which is his son and his father.
So, completely unrelated, the 9th president of the United States was a war hero, so to speak, William Henry Harrison. Shortest termed president ever. Longest inaugural address. Came down with a cold. I ended up getting a virus like the flu or something like that. Was drinking tainted water because they didn't know anything about that. This is let's say 1840-ish, somewhere around there. I'm sure I'm wrong. Anyways, so William Henry Harrison had a son whose name was last name was Harrison. I don't remember the first name. And that man had a son named Benjamin Harrison, who went on to be for the Union side in this American Civil War. Was in with William Tecumseh Sherman. I showed you his grave in one of my shorts. Short videos, not shorts as in pants. And I bring that up because that father, his dad was the president, 9th president. His son, Benjamin Harrison, went on to become the 23rd president. So I'm relating the story to something that I would know. But yeah, completely. And And the Harrison family comes from a long line of like American patriots that signed the Declaration of Independence and stuff like that. But it's just kind of humorous that this man's looking at his father and his son, who went on to be president, and kind of feel like a failure regardless of what you do. Not saying he is, but you look at it like, my dad was president, that's really cool. And then your son becomes president, you're like, well, what have I done with my life?
And the word Taymiyyah.
And if you were interested, Benjamin Harrison only served 4 years. He is the 23rd president. His wife died near the end of his term, and he really didn't care about getting reelected. He did not. He went back to Indianapolis. I visited his home. Big home, beautiful. He owned a pet raccoon, odd fact. And he lived out the rest of his life really not caring about life, so to speak. He lost his love. But Benjamin Harrison also is a question because the president number 22 and 24 was Grover Cleveland, was the only non-consecutive serving president. Just random fact, has nothing to do with this video. I apologize. Video.
Comes from the grandmother, a preacher, a caller to Islam, and they're all named after her. The whole family were a family of knowledge. So his uncles and grandfathers and cousins and brothers, they're all ulama. But he was the one that was the most famous, and he stood out. He was born in a city called Harran, in the southern part of Syria, on the border with Turkey, in the year 661 Hijri. And when he was 6 years old, his city was being attacked by the Tartar, the Mongolians, who were attacking the Muslim lands at that time, and who attacked the Muslim lands several times over a period of 40 or 50 years. And they get defeated, and they come back again, and they get defeated, and they come back again. And each time they attack the Muslim lands, they have the victory at the beginning, but at the end they get defeated.
I kind of remember this. Was this after Genghis Khan? When it was did his son take over? I don't even remember now. But Genghis Khan himself did not attack. If he was alive, he was still over, over in that. He was over yonder, but I don't think he led any attack himself, did he? I could be wrong, but I don't think he did.
So when he was 6 years old, he had to migrate with his family from Harran to Damascus due to the attack of the Tatar. And there he stayed with his family in Damascus and started seeking the knowledge from a young age. By the age of 6, he had read the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, which contains over 30,000 ahadith. At the age of 7, he memorized the Quran. And at the age of 10, he used to go to the gatherings of knowledge and compete with people on students of knowledge who were older than him and ahead of him, and they have been seeking knowledge years before him, but he started competing with them and he excelled over them. So that was him from a young age. Ibn Taymiyyah was a pious man, a God-fearing from a young age, and he never wasted time. That one day his father took the whole family, took his brothers on a picnic, but he refused. And when they came back home, he said to his son, "You have missed out." So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, "By Allah, I have not missed out on anything. During your absence, I have memorized this book." So the father was amazed, and he decided to test him. And he found out that his son at that age, by the age of 7, he had memorized that book. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he sought knowledge and he learned from 200 scholars. And by the time he was 20 years old, he started teaching and he started giving fatwa, especially after the death of his father, who was the teacher of Al-Madrasa Al-Sukkariya, which is one of the famous schools in Damascus at that time, where people used to come from all around the world to seek knowledge. When the father passed away, AhmedABD Ibn Taymiyyah, known as Taqiyuddin, inherited or was nominated to fill the position that was vacated by the death of his father, and started teaching and giving fatwa. But before we talk further about his life and about events that took place in his life, let's talk about the state of the Muslim Ummah at the time of Ibn Taymiyyah. The political state was not the best. The Muslim land was being attacked repeatedly by the Tartar, the Mongolians, who were attacking from the east. And from the west, the Romans were attacking from the west. And they wanted revenge after SalamABD rahimahullah defeated them. At the same time, there was the
I can't pronounce that name. He just said Salah. Was that Saladan, as I would know him, or is that someone different? I'm asking for a friend. I know what the answer is, clearly.
Internal disputes, internal fitan between the leaders and the generals of the Mamalik. So the Ummah was weak at that time. An attack from the east, attack from the west, and internal disputes. So those events made Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah love, protect Islam and the Muslim land. At the same time, he made his concern to correct the actions of the Umara and to shift their focus away from fighting with each other to fixing the condition of the Ummah. The social life wasn't the best either. The society that existed at that time was a mixture between some of the Tartar, the Mongolians, who stayed in the Muslim land, and some of them accepted Islam. But at the same time, they had kept some of their bad habits that they brought with them from their lands. And the Tartar, the Mongolians, were not civilized. Add to that.
Why does he keep saying that the Tartar, the Mongolians? Is that two different groups? Or are the Tartar, are they like a mercenary group for the Mongolians? Or is that just another name for the Mongolians? Like, you guys look at me and you're like, well, that's Kris. And clearly, he's awesome. So awesome Kris, right? And I'm sure that's maybe what we can get going now. But is that what that is? Or is that just, maybe that's what they called the Mongolians? You'll tell me.
The state of knowledge and the state of the scholars at that time was not the best. So we had at that time harsh, strong mentalities that following only one opinion, sticking only to one madhab, and each group thinking their madhab is the only correct one and not willing to accept any other opinion from another madhab. And the door of research, the door of understanding was shut completely due to that strong and harsh mentality and dry mentality that people had developed at that time. So we said that rahimahullah, Ibn Taymiyyah started giving fatwa and teaching at the age of 20. So Imam al-Mazzi rahimahullah was one of the first people that called Ibn Taymiyyah Shaykh al-Islam. Usually it's given to a person that he had excelled in all areas of knowledge, excelled in the areas of hadith, fiqh, usul, aqidah, tafsir, qira'at, ulum al-Quran. A person who usually gathers and excels in all areas of knowledge, people give him the title of Shaykh al-Islam. And later other people, scholars followed and gave Ibn Taymiyyah the title of Shaykh al-Islam. And by the time his reputation started to increase and he started to have a big name, and people in the far east and the far west started to hear about him, and he had strong students of knowledge around him, like Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. He was one of his main students, who himself was a great scholar and was given the title of Shaykh al-Islam al-Thani, or Shaykh al-Islam the second. And Ibn Kathir, the one who wrote the tafsir Ibn Kathir, well, Imam al-Dhahabi, he wrote in the history and wrote about the hadith and the narrators of the hadith, and Imam al-Mazzi, as we mentioned before. So he had strong students of knowledge around him. Imam al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he speaks about Ibn Taymiyyah and he said, I did not see a man like him, and he had eagerness for teaching and loving knowledge like him. He used to wake up in the morning praying Fajr, and he used to sit down after Fajr, not speaking to anyone, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala until the sun rises. And then he would pray 2 rak'at, and then he will start teaching after that until the sun sets. So his day was full of worship and knowledge. Then after that, his brothers were saying that he would go home and would be doing Qiyam al-Layl, where he mixing between Qiyam al-Layl and studying. and he will only sleep few hours. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah never got married due to two factors. The first one, that he was too busy in knowledge, and he only wanted to focus on knowledge. Another factor, that he was imprisoned 21 times in his life. His students say about him that he was very generous when it comes to giving knowledge. That when a person comes and asks him a question, he does not only give him a short answer and turns him away, but he gives him a complete, comprehensive answer. That he makes sure that person who asks him that question understands the answer, and he makes sure that he is strong in that mas'ala and he has strong knowledge about that matter. And that is one of the things, or the disputes he had with the scholars at his time. They used to tell him, a person comes to you to ask you a question, and instead of giving him a short answer, you give him a long answer. He said, I love to give knowledge with sincerity.
That's awesome. And I love my students to be strong students of knowledge. Absolutely. Like if you were to ask me a question about one of the presidents or something like that, and I can answer it, man, I will talk your ear off about it, because I love that type of stuff. I like when people have knowledge, and like with me, if you were to ask me about presidents, prime example, if you were to ask me about them, just a simple question, I might give you that thing, then tell you something else, and then shoot out a couple little fun facts that I found interesting. And some people look at it like, oh, someone's bragging. Well, it's not that at all. But I found I found this interesting. I enjoyed this, so I'm adding this on, and then I'm telling you little fun facts. And I'm doing it in a way so hopefully you might have some interest from it. And it might be something that where you're like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I might look into that. I'm going to go off on a little thing right now. Who's... Okay. So, this is a side story. I apologize. I'll do this. If you don't want to listen, then, I'll do this and you can just fast forward to that part. Okay? So, here's a great story. There was a man in the 1890s named Abraham. He was working on his farm in the frontier of America with his 3 sons. I believe his wife had died. So anyways, this is 1890, we'll just say. So he has 3 sons. The oldest son is Ezekiel. The middle son is Isaac, I believe. The third son is Thomas. So they're working out in the farm. Thomas is 8, Isaac is 10 or 11, and Ezekiel is 13. So Thomas is with his dad, and they're working the field. Indian, Native American, whatever you're supposed to call him. There's a gunshot from the woods, and then he comes whooping out of the woods. He fired a shot. I think it missed, or maybe it barely hit the father Abraham. He comes out. He charges. Abraham tells his sons to get into the cabin. The Indian and Abraham collide. The Indian gets on top of him, fights him off, takes out his tomahawk, and just right in his skull. Thomas is just frozen. He just watched his dad get killed. He's frozen. His brothers are in the cabin. The oldest Ezekiel tells his brother Isaac, go to town and get help. Ezekiel goes inside the cabin. He's yelling for Thomas to come on. Thomas finally gets free, and he looks up and he realizes the native is looking at him, and he's slowly getting up and going towards him. So Thomas turns and runs towards the cabin, and as he's running, he keeps looking back, and this adult is gaining on this 8-year-old kid, and Thomas hears "get down," and I think he kind of falls at the same time. Gunshot goes off. Ezekiel fires a shot from the cabin door, penetrating the chest of the Native American, kills him instantly. Ezekiel checks on Thomas. Isaac comes back. Man, my nose is itching. Isaac comes back with help, and all the brothers now realize that they're orphans. So they bury the dad. About 6 weeks later, the will comes in. The will comes in and basically says that Ezekiel owns the farm. He owns the house and the farm. Isaac has a little bit of schooling. Thomas does not. Ezekiel, the oldest brother, immediately kicks the other 2 brothers out. Isaac goes and lives with an aunt. Thomas goes and lives with another aunt and uncle. Thomas becomes an indentured servant, works hard, and they work you. And all of this is to build you up so that you will end up getting a piece of farmland or something like that on your own. He ends up getting a piece of farmland. He's in his 20s, I believe. He ends up meeting a woman named Nancy. I don't know if anyone is starting to put these things together. He meets a woman named Nancy. They get married. They have a daughter. I don't remember what the daughter's name is. But then he has a son. Thomas, overjoyed with having a son, names his son after his dad. That is how we got Abraham Lincoln, future 16th president of the United States. It's stuff like that that I find fascinating. And I know that story has nothing to do with this, and I do apologize, but when I tell stories about like Abraham Lincoln or stuff like that, I'll tell that story because I think that's just, it tells you about the way that they lived, which is a harsh life. It tells you about the people that they were, and it also tells you about how somebody came into this world. By the way, Nancy was Nancy Hanks, who shares a bloodline with the American actor Tom Hanks. So there you go. Oh, and for everyone else, welcome back. And video.
And I loved my students to be strong students of knowledge. They said about him that when he used to speak and give lessons, knowledge or words used to just be flowing from his mouth, and he does not stop. He does not run out of words. They used to say that he would close his eyes, that he does not want to be disturbed in his teaching, and only you see words and knowledge flowing out of his mouth, and he does not stop at all. The fatwa that he gave people were collected together and compiled in a series of 37 volumes. And there was also another series called Al-Fatawa Al-Kubra, collected and compiled in 5 volumes. He had a strong character, and he was a firm person, and he would be firm and strong in his opinion, especially if he believes that he has the strong dalil, the strong evidence on that. He used to be sharp and have a sharp voice, especially when he's having debates and discussions, but he used to force himself to be patient. At that time, at his time, rahimahullah, a lot of bid'ah started to spread, and those innovations people brought with them from their own countries, and it was something that was spreading in their culture, and later they mixed it with the deen, and it became part of the deen. And he used to deny the bid'ah, the innovation, strongly, and his path was strict on the path of the sunnah and the manhaj of the salaf rahimahullah. And he used to always debate with the scholars at his time, and especially a lot of them were on a different manhaj and different path. Especially Ibn Taymiyyah, he became a mujtahid, and the scholars at his time were only strict on the 4 madhahib, and they denied and rejected any opinion from outside the 4 different madhahib. However, he never lost respect for anyone who had an opinion different than his opinion. That's why he used to always tell his students and his followers that you see me sometimes being strong and tough and harsh when I'm speaking to those other scholars who had a different opinion than me. But that is a situation where I have to apply that strength, and I have to apply that harshness. But there are great scholars, and that does not mean you should get yourselves involved with my disagreements with them. We are scholars and we disagree with each other, but those scholars, they deserve the respect. One day one of his main students, Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he came to him, giving him the good news that one of his main opponents had just passed away. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah was very upset, and he screamed at Ibn al-Qayyim. He told him, how can you call the death of a Muslim brother good news? Then he took all his students and they visited the family of that scholar. He went to his children and he said, I can fill the position that was vacated by your father. Whatever you need, whatever your father was providing for you, I can provide it for you. That was the sincerity of Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah.
I want to say that I don't know if I wouldn't want to hear it as good news. Obviously, death is not good. But I don't know if I would be, especially if I was bumping heads with, well, you know what? If I was bumping heads with somebody and we weren't agreeing, I wouldn't be happy that he was gone. But I don't know if I would lend sympathy to the family, because I would feel like they felt the same way. I would probably just be distant. But I think to have done that really is, a very good person. And to have extended that to the family, I'll do what I can to help you. I think that's good, because it also shows that it wasn't personal. Like he might have bumped heads with somebody on a philosophical way, but he did it wasn't personal. It was just, you believe this, I believe this, we disagree, we're gonna bump heads, but if you're gone, that was never personal to me, and I that's the difference.
He debated with different people at his time. He debated with the Sufis, and he himself admitted that the Sufis are not all on the same path. There's some extreme Sufis, and there are Sufis who only did ijtihad. Some of them his ijtihad was right, some of them his ijtihad was wrong. He debated with the Mu'tazila, who were a deviated group. He debated with the atheists. He debated with the Jahmiyyah, a lot of those deviated sects. But yet, he never treated his opponents with disrespect. And one of the main things that was spreading at the time of Ibn Taymiyyah was the spread of philosophy. And they started mixing the aqidah, the Muslim belief, the Muslim creed, with philosophy. Until the aqidah of the Muslim, the belief became hard to understand, which was full of philosophy. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he rejected all that, and he was in the opinion that the aqidah of the Muslim should be plain and should be only according to the Quran and the Sunnah. And on top of that, he learned the philosophy so he can debate with those philosophers, and he was able to refute all the claims and all the arguments. However, at his time, there was some scholars, some people who had weakness in their heart, and they took their disagreement with Ibn Taymiyyah as a personal matter, and they developed hatred and grudge towards Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. So they decided to go to the Sultan, Muhammad Ibn Qalawun, and they tried to convince him to imprison Ibn Taymiyyah. And not just that, they gave him a fatwa that Ibn Taymiyyah is deviated and he should be. Muhammad Ibn Qalawun rahimahullah, he had so much respect for Ibn Taymiyyah, so he had refused that request from the scholars who hated Ibn Taymiyyah. But Muhammad Ibn Qalawun, he had weakness at that time. He was a bit weak, and he had one of his assistants that his name was Baybars al-Jashinkir. And there are two people by the name of Baybars in the state of the Mamalik. The first one was Al-Dhaha Baybars, and he was with Sultan Qutuz at the time of Imam Al-Izz ibn Abd al-Salam, and who defeated the Mongols, the Tatar, when they attacked the Muslims at that time. Later on, there was another person by the name of Baybars al-Jashinkir, but he was a corrupted person, and he conspired and plot with the other scholars to get rid and overthrow the Sultan Muhammad ibn Qalawun on the expense of imprisoning Ibn Taymiyyah. So Muhammad ibn Qalawun was overthrown and Ibn Taymiyyah was imprisoned. Until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Muhammad ibn Qalawun, to regain the authority again over Egypt and Bilad al-Sham by the support of some of the other Arab tribes, and Berbers al-Jashinkir was, and Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah was freed from the prison. And then Muhammad ibn Qalawun, he wanted to take revenge on those scholars who had plotted against him with Berbers. So he went to Ibn Taymiyyah and he spoke to him in private while other people were watching. And he had a long conversation with Ibn Taymiyyah. So later on they asked Ibn Taymiyyah, what were you talking about, you and Muhammad ibn Qalawun? He said he wanted me to give him a fatwa to all those scholars who plotted against me and him. And I refused his request, and I told him there are scholars. So Ibn Makhluf al-Maliki, one of the main opponents of Ibn Taymiyyah, and he was one of the reasons that Ibn Taymiyyah was imprisoned a few times. Ibn Makhluf al-Maliki, he said, we did not see someone like Ibn Taymiyyah. We plotted against him, but we could not defeat him. And when he had the power, he forgave us and he defended us. As we mentioned before, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he witnessed and he went through so many fitan in his life due to his disagreement with the scholars at his time, and he went to jail 21 times. However, each time he went to jail, he used to see the opportunity. He was teaching knowledge even when he was in jail. He wrote some of his most famous books when he was in jail. So time was something very important for him. On top of that, he had an important saying. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, what could my enemies possibly do to me? If I'm imprisoned, if I go to jail, it is a time alone I have for myself. And if I am sent on exile, it is freedom. It is a trip, it's a journey for me. وَقَتْلِي شَهَادًا. My Jannah, my garden, my happiness is in my heart. Many scholars at his time and after his time gave him the title of Shaykh al-Islam. Over 85 scholars who were at his time or after his time, they referred to him as Shaykh al-Islam. And some of them, they even had different opinions than his opinions, and they opposed him in certain matters, but yet no one denied the position and the respect Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah deserves and the respect he had gained. And from those that spoke about him, called him Shaykh al-Islam, Imam Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani rahimahullah, the great Imam, Imam Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, Imam al-Sakhawi, Imam al-Dhahabi, Imam al-Qayyim, and Ibn Kathir. Imam al-Dhahabi rahimahullah, he said about Ibn Taymiyyah, he has a strong knowledge about the four madhahib. So those that claim that Ibn Taymiyyah rejected the four madhahib, that is not true. And the only time he had an opinion, he had an ijtihad that was different or was outside the four madhahib, he had strong evidence from the Quran and the Sunnah to back up his opinion, his argument. Strong and firm on the haqq, and he does not compromise the haqq. Always remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you see him continuously uttering with the remembrance of Allah Almighty. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he saw that the Muslim Ummah was being attacked. So he used to continuously encourage the scholars to fight and show the izzah, the dignity of Islam. And during one of the times when the Muslim lands, when the Muslim state was being attacked by the Tartar, the Mongolians, at that time the leader of the Tartar was Qazan, who later on he claimed to be a Muslim, and he had a huge army, and the Tatar were uncivilized, and whenever they entered a country they destroyed that country completely. So Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he went with a group of the scholars and he went to meet with Qazan himself. Qazan had prepared lunch for them, so all the other scholars started eating, but Ibn Taymiyyah stood away and he did not eat. So when Qazan, he said to Ibn Taymiyyah, why aren't you eating? Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah said, because that food is haram. That is from the money that you took with no right from the Muslims and other people. I cannot eat from that food. So Qazan was stunned. How can someone speak to him like that? Then Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he started screaming at him and walking towards him, and he said, you claim to be a Muslim, and your father and your grandfather were kuffar, were on the kufr, and they were not as bad as you. The people who were with Ibn Taymiyyah, they started moving away, fearing that when Ibn Taymiyyah will be hit by the sword, but that did not happen. What happened? Ibn Taymiyyah only earned that respect and Qazan was speechless and he could not say anything. And Ibn Taymiyyah, he walked out by himself, and the people who were with him, they walked away from him. But they said, by Allah, we walked away with disgrace. And as much as we tried to please Qazan, he disrespected us and he ignored us. And the only person who gained respect at that time was Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. And he fought in the great battle of Shaqhab that was between the Muslims and the Tartar. And he was encouraging the army and motivating the army, and he was fighting people who described his fighting in the battlefield, described him as a strong warrior. And he fought in another battle against the Crusades who came from Europe. And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah kept on being tested. And one of the most famous agreements he had at that time was the mas'ala of talaq. The Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said, he was in the opinion that if the man that in one place at once, in one go, he tells his wife, taliq, taliq, taliq 3 times, that only counts as 1 divorce, doesn't count as 3. And he opposed in that the opinion of Imam Malik, Imam Ahmad, Imam Shafi'i, and Imam Abu Hanifa. So the people at that time, they were so strong on their madhahib, they strongly denied the opinion of Ibn Taymiyyah. And they accuse him of being a fattan, a person who is causing fitna, and a person who is deviated. In addition, he had this agreement with them over the matters of the grave. How to visit the grave, when is it allowed to visit the grave. And they accused him of saying that it is haram to visit the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. And of course Ibn Taymiyyah did not say that. So they went and lodged another complaint about Ibn Taymiyyah. So he was imprisoned. And each time Ibn Taymiyyah would go to jail, he will take his books with him. And he will also write books. But this time, the punishment was harsh. And the conditions he was going through in jail this time were harsh. He was banned from teaching. He was banned from preaching. He was banned from reading. His books were taken away from him. And he was also banned from writing. And that's when he started to get weak and get sick. He used that time when he was in jail to read the Quran. And the scholars that were imprisoned with him, who went to jail with him, they said he read the Quran 82 times, and he died while he was completing the 83rd khatam. And he died while he was reading Surah Al-Qamar, the end of Surah Al-Qamar, where he was reciting إِنَّ الْمُتَّقِينَ فِي جَنَّاتٍ وَنَهَرٍ فِي مَقْعَدِ صِدْقٍ عِنْدَ مَلِيكٍ مُقْتَدِرٍ. The believers are in great gardens and rivers from beneath them, in a great state with the great Lord, the Almighty Lord. And he passed away when he was reading that. As soon as the news had spread that Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah had passed away, people started rushing to the place where he was imprisoned, and 60,000 people went to the place where he was imprisoned, and 60,000 people followed his janazah.
Wow. So he was silenced. They didn't allow him to read and to write, and that seemed like that was his calling. His real motivation was knowledge, and gaining it by reading, sharing it by writing. And as soon as they took that away, I mean, he was still able to read, but wow, what a good guy. Well, I apologize for stopping it for things that were unrelated, but I like to share. So, wow. Well, I'm going to end this here. I'm sure there's a family fight about to brew between me and my sister, so I'm going to end this here. And until next time, have a good day, have a good night.